Hello and welcome, my name is Idris, and today we're finishing off our series on the blade with a little bonus episode inside of Substance Painter, and you can tell this is a bonus episode since I'm going to be using my mouse. So it's going to be a little introduction to Substance Painter, and just to finish what we started and slightly go into a different subject matter. So to start off, this is Substance Painter. Substance Painter is a texturing software made for the PBR workflow. And the PBR stands for physically based rendering. And this is what game engines are moving towards. Essentially, it means that the textures you're going to be making in this application, in this software, are going to try to mimic the surface properties of the materials like they would react in real life. So metal will be reflective, it will have all the properties of metal, and yeah, plastic will be a lot less reflective, but still reflective. It's a lot of technical stuff. Essentially, it deals with the molecular properties of materials. So at a molecular level, things react in a particular way. So this is a way to mimic those reactions. So essentially, PBR works unlike what we had previously, where you would use a gloss and specular map to refine your material. Here we are going to be using a metallic and a roughness material. Metallic determines on a scale of 0 to 1, or in grayscale, how metallic the surface is. It should be either 0 or 1, but to give you some artistic control, you can use any material, any value in between. But if something is metal, you should set it to 1 and then dial it down. And if it's not metal, you should just set it to 0. You would tone down the metallic value if you were to have a surface that isn't pure metal. So if you had dust or paint over a metallic surface, that could affect the metallic value. So any transitions between the paint and the metal would have a value that is different from either 1 or 0. And the roughness determines how coarse the surface is. So it determines the surface of the grain. So the grainier the surface, the less light will bounce off it, so the less shiny it will be. And the less rough, the more shiny it will be. So a perfectly polished surface would be less rough than a very coarse surface. So that's what roughness is. So this is Substance Painter, and we are going to start a new project. I'm going to hit new. We're going to be using the Unreal Engine template. And we are going to select our blade low. And we are going to be aiming for a 1K map, so 1024 map, but we are going to work double that just because you can always change it at any time, and it's better to work at double the target size. So your work file should be double what you are aiming for in case you need to go up later. So imagine all those HD remasters they're doing now. You want to future-proof this. If someone asks you for a higher quality asset in the future, you'll already have it. So we're simply going to hit OK. And this is the blade we've exported from Zbrush. So I cheated just a little bit since I went to an external package to I imported the files we exported from Zbrush inside of 3ds Max, and I applied a single material to all the subtools. Because if you were to import the FBX we've made from the previous video, instead of here in the layer, in the texture set list, where we have this knife material, we would have a material per subtool. So you would have think of it as a set of textures for each part of our knife, and that's not what we want. So when we look at here in the viewport, you can manipulate the viewport using Alt and a combination of all your left mouse, left click, right click, middle click buttons. Something close to Maya, I believe. If you look at here in the subtool, we only have this single model, and nowhere is it mentioned that there are multiple parts to it, but it's the FBX we've exported, so all the subtools and all the namings are kept inside of the file. So we have this blade low, this hilt guard low, this leather low, and this hilt low. And this is important. This is why we exported all these into an FBX that retained all the subtools. But I cheated and applied a single material, so we only have one texture to work with, one texture set to work with. So this is our material, and this is our layers. This is where we'll be building all the texturing. And you can have as many layers as you need. When you export the file, they'll be separated inside of diffuse, metallic, and roughness and normal maps. So you'll have 4 maps. So it doesn't matter how many layers you have, they'll all be scaled down when you export. So now that we have done this, what we want is to get back all the information we've made inside of Zbrush. So we're going to go here inside of our texture set settings, and these are all the textures we'll be using, and we are not going to be using height map. So we're going to remove this because inside of we do not need the height map inside of Unreal on this particular model. And here are a few maps that are actually working maps. So these are maps that you can either create or import inside of Substance Painter to help you create your textures. So we need all those maps, but we have none of them. So this is what you would bake outside. You would bake your normal map, your ambient occlusion, and so on. And this is what we're going to do now. So we're going to hit bake mesh maps here. We're going to pick our high definition. So this is blade high. This is exactly the file we've extracted from our project. We are going to untick ID because we do not have the ID, and all the others we can use. We are going to ignore all of this, and then we are going to go to match, and we're going to say by mesh name. And this is important because you can see here high poly mesh suffix high and low poly mesh suffix low, and this is why the naming on the previous videos we've made was important. When we exported, we wanted to have all the subtools in the high FBX to be named with the suffix high, and all the low poly with the suffix low, and we had to make sure the naming convention was exactly the same. So it had to have the same name with the same suffix and with all lowercase. So this is why this was important, and now this is going to make sense. We are going to subsample by 4, should be good enough, and we're going to leave everything else at their default, and we're going to hit bake knife.
A few moments later.
And we're done. So it took a couple of minutes, but it's still a lot faster than baking your maps in an other package, since not only is it quite fast, using our naming conventions, we didn't have any. You can see that the bake is pretty clean. We do not have overlapping issues. We don't have this part of the model projecting on the other parts of the model. So using all our naming convention helped us make a pretty clean bake in took maybe 5 or 6 minutes. So it's still a lot faster than using an external package, and you're also saving time because it's applying all those maps automatically. So here we have our normal map, our world space normals, our ambient occlusion, our curvature map, position map, and a thickness maps. And all these maps you do not have to use when you export it inside your game engine. So you can only export the files you want, and even those bakes are not the final textures. Here you have this normal map. So this is the normal map that you can see here, and it's the baked normal map from the high poly asset, but you can still add some more information through the texture. So the exported normal map will be this normal map blended with all the surface detail you might add on top of it. So now that this is done, and we have this fairly clean model, so this is already looking pretty good, we are now going to make a very quick texture just to show you the power of Substance Painter. Not going to go too deep into it, it's an introduction. So here we have all these this selection here on the bottom of materials, and these materials are called substances, and this is why it's called Substance Painter. Substances are algorithmics, procedural textures that are using algorithms to simulate a surface. So essentially there are materials that look, all these materials are procedural, but I think they're not procedural, they're based on textures that you can that are tiling, so you can use them infinitely. And then you have smart materials here that are 100% procedural, so these you can apply to any surface. And these materials have the substance properties, so they have they've generated all the normals, the height maps, the roughness, the metallic values to the textures, but all these smart materials are going to have the same properties, but since they're fully procedural, they are not tied to any texture resolution or model detail. So how does this work? So essentially you have these materials that have properties, and these materials, when you apply them to your model, they will look at all the baked informations you have to generate a texture. So we are going, since we're going for this stylized look, we're going to jump off using this leather stylize, and we're just going to drag it in our layers list, and right there we have a knife made of leather. But what's important is that you can see that where the high points are, you can see that it's slightly more weathered, slightly lighter, and where the recessed parts are, it's darker, and that is done automatically. Because if we applied something like this leather bag material, We're gonna hide all those. We don't need this layer. You can see this is the substance material, the simple material that is made from based on a texture. And it's not as powerful as these smart materials. So we're going to start off from the smart material, since the smart materials will pull information from all your bakes to generate a much more complete texture. So depending on your needs, this is better if you want to paint information. The materials are great. This is what you would use like your paint you will apply with your paintbrush, but you're painting at the same time. You're painting color, you're painting roughness values, you're painting metallic values. But smart material is a great start off point because it will generate the entire thing for you. And once you have this, you can see there's a little folder. You can open this folder and you can see all the maps that go into making this material. So this is not something we are going to delve into inside of this video, but this is where you would go to tweak your color. You have this AO, you can turn them on and off to see what each layer does, and then you can this is the base color, then you have this as a mask. It works like a bit like Photoshop. So you have all your layers grouped inside of them. You can turn them on and off to see what they do. And then you can see that mostly what's affecting the surface is the mask. So you can hit on the mask and then you can tweak it if it's not working like you'd want, or if you want to tweak those values a bit. But it's not something we're going to go inside of this video. But if you're looking into it, this is where you would find all this information. So we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're going to use all the smart materials to make our blade. So this is going to be, of course, the leather. And we're back. Had a mailman break. So whilst the unexpected mailman appeared, where were we? So yes, this is the leather, and now we are going to do the other materials that we need on our blade. So let's keep it to these stylized material, since it fits more the aesthetic we're looking for. So this is going to be our dark metal, and we are going to go for steel scratched. And this is going to be the light part of our blade, maybe even the dark part of the blade. Yeah. So now you can see we have those layers. We can turn them on and off. But what we want to do is we want to hide them where we need them. So let's think of it. So layer is going to be our top layer. Leather is going to be our top layer. We're going to hit here. We're going to add a white. Let's add a black mask. So now our entire leather material disappeared. We're going to hit here on polygon fill, hit mesh fill, since we have this nicely laid out material. So we have our model was designed to have the leather be a separate piece. So now we have our masks selected. We're on mesh fill. We have our color set to white. So when we hit the surface, it will unmask just this leather bit. And that's all we're going to do for the leather. Here you can already see that just having this material breakdown looks pretty nice. Here we are going to add another black mask, and we are just going to unhide the blade like so. And now we have something that looks pretty good already. So this is just pulling from all the work we've done inside of Zbrush. So we haven't tweaked anything yet. We're just applying a smart material, and that smart material is pulling all the data we've made inside of Zbrush to create our texture. So where we have sharp edges, where we have divots and scratches, this is where it's going to try and make it logical to have divots and scratches. And so with a little work from us right here already, we have this blade. And you can see going towards that PBR rendering, you can see that this value here isn't shiny at all. And you can see that the metal looks like metal. And you can see that this is a lot coarser. This has more roughness than the rest. And this is where your the metallic roughness PBR workflow comes in. So now we're just gonna slightly make a little change. We're going to duplicate this scratch steel, because what we want, you can see that this smart material is creating scratches on the surface. And what we're going to want to do is that we want to have these sides of the blade be a bit darker than the sharp part of the blade. But we want to have those scratches keep flowing from the blade, the sharp part of the blade, to the dark part of the blade. So that's why we're duplicating exactly the same smart material. Now we're going to open our copy, and then we're going to go to steel base. We're going to go to the top, and then we're going to add a fill layer. So when you're adding a fill layer, on a fill layer, you can have all your values adjusted at once. Here we just want to affect the color. So we're going to, because here we could, let's just have a quick look. Here, when you add a fill layer, you can tweak the roughness. So this is completely rough. Now this is completely smooth. So you can see that when it's completely smooth, you have this mirror-like quality that starts to show up. Then we can turn this into completely metallic but completely rough, and completely metallic, completely smooth. So this is the shiny 90s metal chrome, the shiniest of metal you can have. And this is, since we're inside of our group, we're the top layer of a group, this will override anything below it, because it works like Photoshop. The layers on top override the layers below. But we do not need to affect the normal map. We do not need to affect the metal map. We do not need to affect the rough map, since we just want to affect the color. So you can see here, it still has these scratches and all the roughness and metallic values that are from the layers below, because we're not outputting them to the first layer. And we're just going to use this to tweak the color. and we are going to make it a slightly darker color, like so. And we are going to edit our mask, so we're going to jump to the masking, and then we're going to turn on polygon fill and not mesh polygon. And this is going to be our jumping point, and we are going to set this to black, and here we can quickly select the outer edge of our blade, maybe not the top, like so. I think this is maybe too subtle. So let's go back to our fill layer and make this a lot darker, like so, so we can actually see it. There. So now we have this dark value, this light value, and you can see that the scratches are flowing from one surface to the other. But now this is a good starting point, but we are the transition is too sharp because it's using the polygon to make our transition, and that's not going to be good enough. So we are going to paint. And we're going to paint it black, like a rolling stone. We're going to simply go, we have our mask selected. We are going to have to think about this. We're going to turn symmetry on. Can I see both of them in the same place? Okay, the symmetry plane is good. So we have symmetry turned on. We have our mesh selected. We are going to lower our brush size. We are painting black. And we are going to smooth out that transition to match the curvature of our model. And here we're just painting the mask. So we're not actually painting any texture, but you can also paint your own texture. Not. Gonna work on the other side. It's gonna be easier for my hand to make that curve. So now we have a lot softer of a transition. Like so. And there you have it. So it's very quick and dirty. We haven't tweaked a lot of things, but it's just to show you that you can pull out a lot of data from your hard work you've done inside of Zbrush, just to show you a bit of substance, how it works, how layers work, how masking works. So you could have multiple materials. So here we have two types of metal. We have leather on a single texture sheet, because in the end, when we'll export, we'll have all those informations inside your texture. So think of layer based on material or based on parts of the model you want to work, and then you can mask what is not affected by that material. You can use, once you've baked your information, you can use all that information here to use that, to pull that data from and use it with a smart material. And once you're going to export all those little scratches and extra information that were added by the smart material will be exported inside of the normal map, so you have a much higher detailed normal map than you had on your bake. So maybe think of it, if you had to work on a model, you would make all your big information inside of Zbrush, and then your surface details, your micro information, the little tiny scratches. This is not something you have to bake. It might be even something difficult to bake. It might become, if you make very, very fine scratches on your model, they might be a lot softer when you bake them. So adding them through a tool like Substance Painter allows you to have much higher resolution, much sharper micro details. So this is something you could do. And then of course we've just scratched the surface, because here we're just using this smart material, but you also have a lot of materials. All these materials you can use with your paintbrush, and then you can tweak them to tweak the value, to tweak the roughness. And if you want to add something, if you wanted to let's see, if you wanted to have this, I'm not on the good layer. No, I'm not on the good layer. Which one is it? It's this one. So here we could add a layer in this material, and then you could paint all these materials you have down here. So you can see here, you can paint them on your texture map. You can paint them on your in the 3D view. You can pick any material like so. And then you can tweak the roughness value to have it have different properties, and you can use that to paint them. Then you could also have, once you've finished your model, you could add a new layer, for instance, and then you could, let's see, what do we have? So let's say we have this, we've created a new layer, and then we are just going to paint this rust all over our model. You can see here we're actually painting, it's like we're painting a stencil. So you have to be careful about where your camera orientation is, and so on. So here you've painted this, and then you could add let's say a black mask to turn it off. And then when you hit this mask, you can left click and add a generator. And here you have a lot of different generator to create a mask automatically. So here you can see that this is applying our rust to any highlights. This is going to be doing the opposite, so everything would be rusted except the sharp parts, and so on and so forth. So I'm already talking a bit too much. It's starting to be a lot of information, but you can essentially think of it as using your layers to break your materials off, and then you can also add layers for actual layers on your material. So you could start making a very clean metallic part, so making it as if it was brand new, then add a layer of paint, then add a layer of wear, then add a layer of rust, and you can toggle them on and off. So you could make an asset brand new, look brand new, then add a layer for a damaged version, for a rusty version. So if in your game or your story you have this weapon being brand new, and then throughout the course of the story, the weapon gets lost and found again, and so now it's rusty. So you could, using a single asset, you could make a clean version. Then you can layer that, layer the damage on top of it, export two versions, or you can generate automatically some wear and tear. You could also generate some erosion. So if you had assets like stones and you want to have it be logical where the erosion would happen, using all those maps you're baking here, like this world space normal or disposition, you can make it flow logically. So you could use particles here. This is not something we're going to show, but you could simulate a sandstorm, and this is going to be using particles to simulate dust hitting your material and then falling to the ground. So it would randomly hit your surface and then start to settle inside of crevices, and you can have this simulation of rain, of puddles of water having fall along the surface and stain your steel or your leather based on gravity and so on. So a lot of powerful things you can do with Substance Painters. This is just an introduction to get you started. I advise you to start with this video, bring in your asset, bake it. It's fairly straightforward. And once you've done this, start working with layers, turn them on and off, use smart materials to slowly grasp what each of them do, and play around with the software. You can buy Substance Painter for a fee, or you can have it, you can pay a monthly subscription. So a lot of options, and it's one of the like Zbrush is the go-to 3D sculpting tool. Substance Painter is becoming the go-to texturing application for the PBR workflow, at least. So I think already I've been talking too much, so I'm gonna wrap this here. I hope you enjoyed this series. I hope you enjoyed this bonus video. If you want to see more of Substance Painter, if you want us to have something covered in detail, please do leave a comment in the comment sections. Please do leave a like if you found this video useful. Subscribe if you haven't, to see more of this kind of content. And I'll see you guys in the next one.